Yo, what's up? My name is Pat, and today I'm going to be doing a pretty different video than what I normally do. I actually want to go over some Dungeon Defender statistics to sort of help you guys understand maybe which game you want to play, draw some conclusions, and honestly just go over data. I feel like the Dungeon Defenders community, how could you not love data? It's a very statistical and analytical game, constantly learning things, constantly just upgrading your gear by minuscule amounts. I think we all like numbers, and humans like to see number go up. Unfortunately, Dungeon Defenders and just most video games, over a long period of time, most video games kind of go down in population. It's not really a number go up kind of story, but there's still some really interesting things that happened throughout the past year or so of all these different Dungeon Defenders games. And we can see the most popular Dungeon Defenders games here listed in order. So currently, as I'm recording this, Dungeon Defenders 2 had 418 players online. Dungeon Defenders have 318. It's honestly less. The number is lower than I expected. This is a Saturday. At 1 p.m. Not like peak hours, but it's still a weekend. It's a lot lower than I expected, unfortunately. I love these games so much. I think Dungeon Defenders it's like my fourth or third favorite game of all time. I think fourth. It's an absolute masterpiece, absolute beautiful game, and it's a shame that not as many people play it or give it a chance. Dungeon Defenders Awakened really shocked me. I knew people had a less than favorable opinion of it, but 18 players currently online with a 30-day average of 18. Wow. This is from steamcharts.com. So this is as accurate as I'm aware of, or accurate we can get that from my understanding. Also, Dungeon Defenders going rogue. 0 players with a 30-day average of less than 1 player. Ouch. I honestly liked going rogue when I played it. I was like, wow, this is kind of a fun game. Would I pay $15 for this? Probably not. It's like a dungeon. It's like a pretty shallow dungeon crawler, dungeon explorer type game in the rogue like game. If you like the Dungeon Defenders franchise and you want to see those characters in a roguelike, then go play that. Sure, it's fun, but the price, it's whatever. Dungeon Defenders Eternity, I think that was some sort of mobile game. I don't know if it's still out. I don't know if that still exists. If you know more about Dungeon Defenders Eternity, I would honestly love to learn more about it in the comments. But moving on from here, I want to go into individual games. We can learn a lot about the data from these things. So this is the 7-day chart for Dungeon Defenders 2. We see an all-time peak of the game at 18,000 players. That is crazy. That's when the game released, obviously. We can extend this to go 1 month. What I think is more interesting is doing 1 year. And it's sad, but I think it's still interesting data that's worth pointing out. About a year ago, Dungeon Defenders 2 was averaging around 900, almost 1,000 players a day, 800 here, 700, and it has just slowly gone down over this past year to the point where Dungeon Defenders 2 has halved in its player base in the past year. When you only have 1,000 players, halving down to 500 is pretty brutal. Now, we'll see what that exactly means if people are playing other games or other Dungeon Defenders games here in a quick sec. If we go back to all and zoom out, we can see as well just the general decline. Happens with most video games. It makes sense. You see the dedicated players, around 1,000 players from 2018 all the way until 2024. So we didn't see much of a decline. This is the most decline we've ever seen for DD2. Is in 2024. So the game is taking a decline more than it really ever has, just slightly more than it ever has, but it really stayed at 700 to 1K for a long time, and now it's pushing those 500, dipping to the 500s. And when it started at around 1,000 a year ago, it's sad to see. It is sad to see. 418 players at that 25. Let's go jump over to Dungeon Defenders 1 now. I think Dungeon Defenders 1 has some pretty interesting analytics. If you look at 1 year, look at this spike. This is actually crazy to me. Dungeon Defenders 1 had a massive, this is massive considering the average player base. Right now, the average player base slightly less than Dungeon Defenders 2 at around 300 or so, 400 or so. You can see here. And then we started a year ago, we were at around 500, 600 players or so. So we're about the same, maybe a slight decrease of around 100 players or so for Dungeon Defenders 1. But look at this massive, I think this was the Ruthless update. I think the Ruthless update really brought back a lot of players. However, it does not look like those players stuck around, which is really, really sad to see, honestly. I would have loved to see more people give the game a longer chance after this. But what I think is super interesting is if you go to the all zoom, right? We saw this spike for 1,300 players in 1 day. In Dungeon Defenders 1 for the Ruthless update. The last time we saw a spike like that in DD1 was all the way back in 2016. The Ruthless update brought back the most amount of players to Dungeon Defenders since 2016. I think that's pretty amazing. Now, obviously, those players didn't stick around, and that's a huge problem. Player retention is always a very, very difficult thing with games, but I think it is impressive to say the least. Also, these numbers in terms of when the game actually released, these do not represent actual peak Dungeon Defenders popularity. I know this game was extremely popular on things like the Xbox 360 store. That's where I first started playing Dungeon Defenders, and that's how I discovered the game. So I think that's important to keep in mind when looking at these super old numbers. So I think it was more popular. It's shocking how many people I talk to about Dungeon Defenders and like, oh my god, like that game, like, oh yeah, I play that game cooperatively with my brother on the couch, like growing up. Like there's a lot of people who have a Dungeon Defenders story. So yeah, I think that peak, that spike from Ruthless difficulty is amazing, and it's more than we expect. So hopefully we can see some more players coming back and just having some sort of interesting challenges along the way. If you guys have any ideas, I'm still new to the community. I'm not going to sit here and act like I have some ideas to save the game or to even say the game is dying. It's not dying. It's just consistent. Like Dungeon Defenders, it's a niche, small community of very dedicated, very hardcore players, and it's pretty consistent. Is it dying? I mean, not really. Like maybe one day, sure, you could argue that it's dying off, but so is everything at some point. Technically I'm dying, right? Like if by that definition, sure, but like that's a little extreme. I'd say it's doing fine. It's staying consistent. Is it a popular game? No. Is it a great game? Yes. Let's check out Dungeon Defenders Awaken. Now, I haven't looked at these yet. I don't really see. I can't imagine there's much information here where I'm like, oh yeah, wow, this explains so much. Like Dungeon Defenders Awakened never really did well or did great. Like back here we saw 140 players or so. Let's go to all. Let's see, 2,800 or so peak. I could not get into. I really wanted to like this game, but it just straight up from the 2 to 3 hours I played it. So keep in mind, I'm not trying to be too harsh of a judge. This game seemed worse than DD1. It was like, why? It was a downgrade. Why would I ever play this over DD1 was the sentiment that I walked away with. So there's nothing really to say about Dungeon Defenders Awakened data. Nothing super interesting, but I do feel like DD2 and DD1 had some interesting moments over the years, had some interesting things worth talking about. Also, I forgot to mention this, but I think it's absolutely astounding that DD1 and DD2 are so close in popularity when DD1 is not a free-to-play game. When a game is free-to-play, it monstrously buffs up the numbers, right? The fact that the all-time peak was 12,000 versus 18,000 from a game that cost $15 versus a free-to-play game. It's easy to think, $15, that's not that much. The problem is, when you have to pay for a game, it alienates so many children, kids, teenagers who don't have access to mom's credit cards. Like, it's a massive, massive difference. It is a massive, massive. Usually, free-to-play games are looking to have 2 to 3 times as many players as non-free-to-play games. Like, it is a massive, massive difference. So to see Dungeon Defenders 1 still have around 318 players versus DD2 being only 100 more, I guess 25% more at that point, to be fair. But it's pretty impressive. I think DD1 is holding up extremely well due to its solid gameplay. And there's probably something there in DD2. I've also never been able to get into DD2 personally. I'm sure there is something there. I'm sure there is a great game there that it's been tough. I mean, I just have too much nostalgia for DD1, but it's cool to see DD1 holding on, and it's cool to see all the data. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this little sneak peek or just peek at the data. Hopefully it was fun, interesting. You learned something. You added some perspective. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Dislike if you didn't. And subscribe for Dungeon Defenders content every other day. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one. Peace, Arena.